What would happen if the church started to ask questions? What would happen if the church starts to teach history, and not just an off balance history, but a balanced view of history that does not just look at Constantine and all the goodness that he brought for Christianity, but literally look at all of Constantine. What was he before Christianity, and what was he after Christianity? Constantine legalized Christianity and stopped the persecution of Christians during his time. Every other emperor persecuted Christians because Christians were seen as a threat to the state. Now, Rome was a polytheistic empire that worshipped many gods, and Christianity is monotheistic. There's only one God, and much of what Rome stands for, Christianity stands against it, and so they would persecute Christians. And then here comes Constantine, who had this revelation apparently from God, and I'm not going to say it's not, I don't know, I wasn't there, but then this polytheistic emperor comes along and he legalizes Christianity and stopped the persecution of Christian, and then he claims to be a Christian. But did his life change? No. You know what Constantine did? Constantine mixed a lot of his pagan practices with what he was trying to establish in the Christian community. He merged them together so that there can be peace between the state and the church. So you have an emperor that he put money into building churches, into replacing a lot of the structures that were broken down or torn down or burned down during Christian persecution, and gave Christianity their freedom to practice without persecution. And that sounds so much like what do you call it, research today. The person or the donor of the research, do you not think he has a say in how the research sways and the outcome of the research? Yeah, he does. And so you have this this same display where the church seems to have come under the authority of the state, because it now is a state-sponsored organization. They are exempt from paying tax. They were given a lot of money by the state. So the state is pushing this religion, and much of the people who are now come on board with Christianity were once a polytheistic worshiper of many gods. And so you have Christian, when you look at Christianity today, a lot of the practices that they do mirrors a lot of the things that used to happen in Rome during the time of their pagan worship. So you have Easter, derives from the worship of the Easter god Ostre, or I don't know how you say her name, Ostre, the god of fertility, where you have Easter bunny and Easter egg. You have Christmas, the worship of the sun god during Christmas. Sunday was a day appointed for legal worshiping, because it was a day that honors the sun god. And these are things that Constantine were very much and heavily tied to. And one of his biggest god that he worshipped, one of his most devoted, he was most devoted to this god is the sun god. So you have Constantine, who has influenced much of Christianity. But when you look at what Christianity celebrates, you will see that a lot of it actually derives from pagan worship in the Roman Empire. Sorry. Jesus wouldn't, because he died in resurrection, but the disciples never celebrated Easter. The only thing that Jesus, the disciples, and maybe the early Christians after them or before they died celebrated was the Passover. And so when you look at the time that Easter happened, Easter occurs actually around the time of celebrating this pagan goddess, Ostre. And the Passover celebration is much further along. And this is why the day of Easter changes every year, because it is dependent on when this solar lunar thing happens. And when there's going to be a balance between night and day. Whereas Passover, there is a set time between, I think, April 4th. I can't remember the days now. But anyways. So you see that a lot of our traditions and practices in a Christian church today does not reflect the practices of the disciples of Jesus Christ, nor do they reflect the practices of the Jewish believers, or they are far off from the day or Easter. I guess it's not that far off. But yeah, like even as believers, like if you should start asking questions, one of the things that Christians often say is that, well, it doesn't matter, like now when we celebrate Easter, we're not celebrating a pagan god, we're celebrating Jesus Christ. Or Christmas, I know I'm celebrating like the birth of Jesus, so it doesn't matter. And when you talk like that, it's almost like you are taking a dagger, and you might as well dagger the history of the Bible. Because if history in itself doesn't matter, then the history of the Bible doesn't matter. And so why does the gospel matter? It would not matter. Nothing would matter. Because the reason why the gospel matter is because of what happened in the garden with Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit. So if history doesn't matter, then the gospel today would carry zero weight. But it does, because history matters. We are still living in the consequences of history. We say that God doesn't change. He's the same God yesterday and today. But yet we neglect what the Lord says to Israel when he brought them into the land, and he was telling them what to practice, what not to practice. And he says, don't even mention the name of those gods in your mouth. They should not be found on your lips. Only worship, only practice and celebrate what I give you to celebrate. Do not mix it with the worship of other nations. Because the other nations worship false god. Those were the word of the Lord then. He is the same God today. So why is it that we now today think that we can create celebrations, because God never told us to celebrate any of these, create celebrations in honor of him that mixes with pagan holidays and celebration. Pagan holidays that worship false god. Something that the Lord absolutely hates. So I think just to close off, if the church starts to ask questions and teach a balanced view, I think, Lord have mercy. it wouldn't go well. It would not go well. Because you know what they do? They teach you the good, one side of Constantine. Constantine legalized Christianity. He brought together the Council of Nicaea. He did all these great things for Christianity, but they never tell you the rest. That much of his polytheistic worshiping of false god continued in his life and was a representation of who he was. The coins, the money, they all bore symbols of these pagan gods. So nothing really changed. He just wanted to honor somebody whom he thought brought him victory, the Christian God. And for him to do that and maintain what he truly believed, he had to merge them together, not only because of that, but also because he did not want to cause an uproar in Rome. Because Rome was a heavily polytheistic society. So as a Christian, go look things up. Look things up. We are living in 2026. There's no reason why a Christian today should just be blindly going along, following along, and not having a thorough understanding on what everything is that they are partaking in. Now, I'm not going to say that I am like the most educated on everything. I am not. But you know what? I am also not. I'm not somebody who is going to be like, but I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Ask questions. Because whether or not you choose to know the truth, it is going to be held against you. And you're going to have to give an account for it.